Welcome to Legal Beagle.
Hello and welcome to Legal Beagle with attorney Kristina Lyke, founder of Lyke Law PLLC. I am your host, Kevin Rosenquist, and today's episode is From Arrest to Advocacy, Expert Advice on Criminal Defense with our guest special. Well, I guess you're not really a guest. You're like my co-host, Kristina Lyke. Welcome.
Thank you. It's nice to be here.
Can you share a little bit about your background and what inspired you to practice criminal defense law in Michigan?
Absolutely. I'd like to start off with, I didn't like bullies growing up. So when I was very young, I saw Ronald Reagan get shot. And I couldn't figure out why he kept getting shot over and over again because you're just a little kid. And I saw so many bullies in school, and I was always the one that stuck up for individuals and thought, you know what? I don't like it when people are being bullied by individuals. So I started off actually as a prosecutor as an externship over in Livingston County. And what I found out is that apparently my boss thought I actually wrote like a defense attorney because I thought there needed to be justice. And I will say this, I ran for Congress a few years back. And what happened is people were making fun of me because I was a defense attorney. You know what I love about being a defense attorney is this, it's the only attorney in the Constitution. You have the right to an attorney. You don't have the right to a prosecutor, you have the right to an attorney. Mm-hmm. So I became a defense attorney because I wanted to make sure that we had justice in the community and make sure that, rehabilitation is a big thing as a defense attorney. So I want to make sure that we're rehabilitating individuals and making sure that the community is safe too as well.
I think too, in so many in TV and movies, it's so often that the defense attorneys are the bad guys. I mean, especially the most famous, obviously, is of course Law and Order. And every defense attorney is so smarmy and rude and just mean, right? So I think people just have this preconceived notion of what a defense attorney is supposed to be like.
Well, I will say Law and Order is one of my favorite shows.
It's great. I'm not dogging it. I love it.
But the thing of it is that it is actually the most accurate to all the other law shows like mm-hmm. Boston Legal and all the other ones that we had beforehand. But, I would say you're probably right about making them slimy and things of that nature. A couple mm-hmm. times, though, you have a couple good ones on there, but you're always in the back of your head, you got to object. Make sure you object on that. Yeah. So, you're absolutely right.
I always feel like they're like, get out of here, McCoy. You don't know what you're talking about. Like, it's always the defense attorney's always like kind of like antagonistic a little bit. So,
but don't get me wrong, that does happen sometimes.
Sure, of course.
It does happen in court sometimes, but usually it happens out in the hallway. But, I find that if you don't you shouldn't take your cases personal. You want to zealously advocate for the clients and make sure you're doing the best job at all time periods. But the thing of it is afterwards, you're still going to have a relationship with that prosecutor or with the individuals, the probation officers. And you want to make sure you continue on having a good relationship because that does help you out in the future too, as well, with helping other clients in the future. So, it's always good to not take things personal.
Yeah. It's a good point. You don't want to burn bridges because you're going to see those people again.
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Now, you also do family law as well, correct?
That's correct. I'm actually a family law attorney. I started my practice back in 2006, right after I passed the bar, and I decided I'm going to open up my own business. My dad told me not to, and I've always done the opposite, it seems like, but he wanted me to start in a firm, and I said, no, I want to work for myself, and I had a dream when I was actually I think I was 8 years old. In high school, people remember this. There was this little plate that we had. We had to make a license plate about who we are. And wouldn't you know, I put Lyke Law. And so I named my business Lyke Law, and it's stuck. So
that's great.
But yes, I practice family law. I also practice criminal and constitutional law as well. My dad was a Second Amendment. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No. I was just going to say, how do you balance all this? That's a lot.
You know what? I enjoy practicing. There's challenging times, of course, but I'm a workaholic. My parents brought that into my life. My dad was a UPS driver and a gun dealer and also a fireman too. And my mom, she was a housewife, but she took care of 4 kids. I was the youngest and the only girl. So 3 brothers, they kind of made me tough.
I'll bet.
And I'm very thankful to have 3 brothers because I think it's helped me over the years to relate to cases and also understand perspective on the guy's point of view and also on the woman's point of view too as well. And that helps especially in family law cases. But family law, believe it or not, a lot of family law cases run into criminal defense too sometimes. There's domestic violences, there's drug addictions, things of that nature. And I find just the other day, I found that an individual who I was going up against didn't know some of the protocols on CSC or the protocols on drug addiction. And so I had an upper hand on that because of the fact I do practice criminal law as well.
Interesting. Yeah, that's a good point. That is a good point, to overlap. So when someone's facing criminal charges, I feel like it's obvious that it's important to hire a defense attorney early in the process. How can that early legal intervention impact the overall outcome of a case?
That's a great question. It's always best to hire a defense attorney right away. And a lot of times, it might not be, you might not be able to do that right away because of the fact is you get arrested that evening. But if you know that there is going to be charges on you or you're having investigations, contact an attorney, contact myself, and we can get you through that because we ask a few questions. And I'll ask them, all right, have you received a phone call from a police officer yet, a detective? And I said, I'll tell them, no, don't contact them. Get the person in here, a client in here. We'll talk to him for a while. And usually we get them retained. We call it an investigation process. And then sometimes what I do is I go into the police station with them. And but a lot of times I write a letter to the police department and indicate that they are represented. You're not allowed to talk to them any longer.
Mm-hmm.
So, because if
Mm-hmm.
they talk to them and they know that they're represented on the same issue, then that can be fruit of the poisonous tree and those statements can be taken out. So,
Right. Yeah. See,
so it's
I know
very,
that.
what's that?
I said, even I know that.
Right. And it's beneficial too, because sometimes we can get charges. So let's say that the individual has not been charged yet for a criminal action. Sometimes we can talk to the prosecutor, depending on if you know the prosecutor's office, you know how the protocol works. But either way, you can talk to the prosecutor and try to figure out, okay, here's what happened. This is not really a case that should be going forward. Can we try to resolve this outside of court so we're not ruining the person's career? Or having them get fired for an employment issue or something of that nature. So it's very helpful to have individuals retain an attorney prior to
What are some of the common mistakes you see people make immediately after being arrested?
that. Well, we get to see videos, when we ask for discovery. And a lot of the mistakes I see is people think that the police officers are their friends and they just start spewing out things and telling them everything like they're a priest or counselor or something. And they tell them, and that's going against your Fifth Amendment right, right? So you have that right to remain silent. And what happens is they go and try to explain their way out of something. And what happens is they get themselves deeper into it. And so then they get more charges as well sometimes, or they may have not had the last thing that they needed to get a warrant or the last thing they needed to actually make that conviction stick. And your omission just sunk you. So that's a big factor right there. Other factors is that they talk to other people or they go to jail. And if they're sitting in the holding cell, they start calling their mom or their dad and they start asking them to call different witnesses. And what happens is that you get maybe a witness tampering charge because you're trying to tell them, oh, hey, tell them not to show up for court. And that leads into charges either for a family member or for themselves because all of those calls are recorded. And
Oh, yeah.
they make the big mistake on that.
That's a huge mistake.
And it's very huge. And I'm like, what are you doing? And
Yeah.
and sometimes you can tell people over and over again not to do something, but a lot of times I've only had that experience probably once after I told somebody, and that was we have ethic rules that it's not a must, but we are to at least do a minimum of 40 hours of volunteer work a year. And so I used to do a lot of quarter points. I would take them and I treat them just the same as my regular clients. And so a lot of times they had the distrust because it wasn't a retained attorney. So I explained to them, look, this is how much I usually charge for this kind of case. I'm a real attorney, real life here, but you need to listen to what I say because otherwise you're going to get yourself in deeper trouble.
Yeah, and it's easy to think like, oh yeah, don't do this or don't do that. But in the heat of the moment, when the cops are there and stuff like that, so a lot of times people probably aren't thinking rationally, and they aren't as composed as like we spoke about the people on Law and Order or other movies where the people being accused of crimes are just so relaxed and all that. I mean, it's tough, but you got to try to keep your head about you. And I suppose the best advice is just don't say anything, right?
Well, that's true. And then a lot of times you see stops, that
Mm.
are just like a reasonable cause stop. And maybe the police officer will ask, hey, can I search your car? And they'll be like, the individual will get in the car and say, sure, go ahead and search my car. And I'm reading this police report or seeing it on the video. I'm like, no, don't allow that.
Oh,
Because what happens is, and I had a case like this, it actually, it was not that person's gun. Someone else put the gun there. And so we had this case and it had to go to trial. Thankfully, they were found not guilty, but it could have been the opposite. And so
mhm.
you never know if you give a ride to somebody or if they're going to leave maybe some cocaine residue in there. Hopefully your friends don't, or leave, a gun in there. Hopefully they don't, but you never know. And so it's always best not to say, or always say, no, don't search the car.
Yeah, yeah, that's wow. That's a great. I'm glad he got. That's a crazy story. Obviously, criminal cases can be super complex and intimidating for individuals, just as kind of we were just alluding to. How do you help clients navigate the challenges, and what should a client expect when working with you?
One of the things is that I always ask them to give me a timeline of events. And I want not just like their short version. I want from the time that they got up in the morning all the way up until when the event occurred and after. And then I sit down and go through this timeline with them. But some of the things that they need to expect is that I'm very blunt and very to the point. If I ask you to do something, I'm only doing it for your benefit. I want to make sure that we try to either win that motion or try to make sure that we get them prepped for trial. And so I'm very, I want things done right then and there. So that's one thing a lot of clients have said about myself. Sometimes you might think she's a little bossy, but you get good results. So I'll
Hmm.
take it as it is, right? But another thing is that making sure that the clients are prepared for each time that they're going to court. One of the things I do is, what kind of case is it? Are we dealing with anger management? Are we dealing with a mental health issue? Are we dealing with something to do with drugs, okay, or alcohol? So we start placing them into different programs, and I call some of my experts that I know that will be helpful to assist, and I get them enrolled in that program right away. And another thing I do is that when they get retained, all of a sudden we send them a welcome letter that actually gives them. I can't tell you what's going to happen, obviously, but I give them what the basics are, what the next steps are, and then every time we go to court, or if there's an offer from the prosecutor's office, then what I do is I place that in the letter too as well. So
Okay.
every time they're well aware and well informed, and I believe that kind of helps. Not kind of, but it really does help the individual understand the process because they're scared. They can't
Of
remember
course.
what's going on, and they need someone to be there that's going to zealously advocate for them. And we're also there making sure that things are done appropriately too for them, and also getting them help to rehabilitate themselves.
Yeah, and I think that's that you seem to you can tell you're passionate about that part of it too. It's not just about getting them off of charges, but you advocate for rehabilitation and so that they don't end up in your office again.
Right. It's not about trying to, get more clients in the future or have repeat offenders. And that's not the goal. The goal is I always try to look at how can we help this individual and make sure. Because one of my guys actually a long time ago, I'll never forget the story. He's actually a pharmacist now, but he was a drug dealer. And, it was amazing because he came up to me years later and said that I saved his life. And of course, I give God credit, but it was work, you know, but the point is that he actually is a legal pharmacist now. I helped him with his FAFSA forms. I helped him get through everything because no one in his family ever graduated from school or graduated from college. And I thought, you know what? If we can get you out of this situation, because he never was in trouble before, that this
Mhm.
would be a perfect career setting for him. And he's doing very well.
That's awesome. That's a great story.
It is. I love that story.
Can you, without discussing trade secrets, can you give me some of your proactive strategies that you employ to build a strong defense before the case goes to trial?
Sure. Some of the things that we do is making sure that we talk to the witnesses, getting investigators, polygraph examinations. Those are all costly, of course, but the polygraph examination is very helpful, especially with CSC cases, which are criminal sexual conduct cases. And those help, whether or not the person has actually committed the crime of the criminal sexual conduct, whether or not there was maybe a rape or a molestation or anything of that nature. those polygraphs are helpful in negotiations. And, we can go on and on about polygraphs and whether or not they're legitimate or not, but just that's what we use on that basis. We also talk to investigators. That's a big thing in criminal cases because investigators actually talk to the different witnesses and find out whether or not their story is truthful or not. A lot of people miss details. Identification. Somebody could say, yeah, I saw this individual. He had a mustache on and he might have been just bald. And, the other person said he had a mustache and gray hair and he might have been actually bald with no mustache. So it's always nice to have an investigator talk to these different witnesses and find out what do they know about the case and what were they looking at the time of the scene, or where were they at? And sometimes we actually find out the witnesses were not even there at the scene that day.
So to wrap up, what advice would you give to someone who has just been arrested, and also how can they best prepare for their first meeting with you?
Sure. One of the things I would suggest is always contact an attorney if a police officer or a CPS worker calls you. It's always better to contact them first, and then to meet with me. There's not a lot of preparation, but what I do ask is make sure you bring, like, if you already have been charged, which means you've been arraigned with the court, bring all your papers. Bring what your bond conditions are so I can go over those with them. Bring the charges so I can actually see what the charges are. Because a lot of times moms and dads will call, or other people will call in the family, and they have the wrong charges. You have to actually look up online to find out what actually the charge is. And I always like to know the charge before they come into my office, because it might be something obscure that I haven't dealt with, or I haven't dealt with in a while, and they might have, legislation may have changed it. So I like to check the law, check the jury instructions, see what we're dealing with, see what the elements of the crime is, and then also make sure that they tell me what their story is and have a good timeline for me. And a lot of times I tell that to them again because their timeline is very short. And we go through the questions and try to figure out who was there and what happened. And then I see what we can do next. And then I give them the procedure of what's going to happen and how I can actually benefit them and their lives. And a lot of times, especially juveniles, we just had a great case with a juvenile. He's actually, the community is actually helping. I have great resources, and I'm very thankful for some of the resources I have. But some people want to be in the military and they get caught with something, or they get, they do what their friend wanted them to do. So what do? We try to help them get HIDA, Home's Youthful Training Act, or a deferred sentencing. But I also line them up with individuals who have been in the military and they want that dream. So let's try to help them, fulfill their promises in life and their dreams and goals.
That's really cool. That's really cool. You can feel your passion, and that's a refreshing thing. Well, thanks for tuning in to Legal Beagle with attorney Kristina Lyke. To connect with Kristina, head to likelaw.com. That's Lyke. And don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel. Kristina, it was great having you here. I'm looking forward to more discussions in the future.
Thank you. It was great being here.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button and leave us a review in the comments.